This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's January 21st, 2026. On this day in 1985, Nashville hit its lowest ever recorded temperature, minus 17 degrees. That's not just the mercury dipping to that point momentarily either. It was the average low temperature for that night. The daytime temps were in the low single digits. It came in the midst of a snowstorm that, as most here do, slowed business in Middle Tennessee to a halt. Beyond the problems of dangerous roads, there were problems like frozen pipes at the headquarters of Third National Bank. I remember that storm, but I only really remember being inside. Despite being prime play outside in the snow age, it must have just been too bitterly cold. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. If you look at mid-state weather forecasts at all, you know that right now is all eyes on this coming weekend. As I record this, the National Weather Service is being a little vague about what we should expect. They say that very low temperatures are quite likely. They're suggesting we should be ready for snow and ice. They're not making clear predictions of how much precipitation, though. I'm not saying they're being cagey, not at all. It's more that there are a lot of variables in what could happen between then and now, and those variables could make a big difference in how much could fall and accumulate. But the message seems to be that we're better off preparing for a lot. Now, how much snow is a lot is very much dependent on what place you're talking about. This is, of course, a part of the nation where 2 or 3 inches is a kind of batten down the hatches situation. And boy, transplants from the north like to give us a really hard time about it. But I will always maintain that you have to keep in mind that we only have the opportunity to practice the skills involved in snow removal or spotting black ice a few days out of the year. If practice makes perfect, it's only natural that we're not great at that stuff. Now, many mid-state communities do have more resources than in the past to deal with snow and ice. More equipment for brining roads, more snowplows. But we definitely have our limits. And that's especially true the farther you get out from the city or the deeper you get into hilly territory. And if this weekend does turn out to be the kind of storm that dumps a foot of snow on Middle Tennessee, well, that would be well beyond what limited skill sets we've developed in recent decades for handling winter weather. To put things into perspective, 2 of the top 5 snowfalls ever recorded in Nashville history were around the 10-inch mark. I know that's just a healthy day of winter weather in some mountainous areas out west, but here it's a blizzard. Those 2 10-inch snowstorms were in 1951 and 1964, and the only 3 that were deeper were all more than 90 years ago. There hasn't been a foot of snow in a single Nashville snowfall since 1929. Now, we may get a huge dump of snow this weekend. We may get far less. As I said, there's a ton of variability right now in the forecasts. But what the weather experts are clearly saying is that we should do what we can to prepare for significant impacts by the end of this week. Frigid temperatures, the possibility of downed trees and power outages, dangerous conditions on the road. All in all, more winter than this southern community has the muscle memory to handle. In just a few minutes, this week's edition of What Wear Wednesday. That's coming up after the newscast.
At WPLN, we tell stories about honoring our families.
If he become a monk, that means that mom and dad will go to heaven when they pass away.
And preserving memories.
I never heard of a Rosenwald School. Nobody ever told me that's where I went.
I'm Char Daston, and my reporting connects you with your neighbors and the important moments in their lives.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The rate of kids sleeping in state offices while waiting for an emergency foster placement shot back up in 2025. Data analyzed by the Tennessean shows a 400% increase. That's 445 children who spent at least one night in a Department of Children's Services office. Officials say several of the transitional homes that provide temporary placements have closed or paused operations. There was also an uptick in the number of kids who are hard to place due to particular needs. On average, those children were housed in office space for about a week. The longest stay was substantially longer. A child in Northeast Tennessee was in the office for just over 100 days. The state of Tennessee acknowledges there are problems with how it runs the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, or food stamps. It helps about 700,000 Tennesseans get enough food. The Department of Human Services was sued last year. People wrongly had their benefits canceled. And as the appeals process dragged on for months longer than legally allowed, some were evicted or delayed needed medical care. Since then, the two sides have been working on an improvement plan. The court put a special mediator on the case. Late last week, he signed off on some of the early steps. Some of the proposed fixes are relatively straightforward, but others are going to take a long time. WPLN health reporter Catherine Sweeney explains.
The original lawsuit raised a long list of concerns, and this first phase of improvements tackles a handful of them. One big problem: when someone gets a rejection or cancellation letter, it doesn't explain why they were told no or what to fix. DHS agreed to start listing the reason, like the applicant missed an interview or the household income is too high. Sounds simple, but DHS says making that change on the web portal is going to take several months of intense work with its tech contractor, Deloitte. It laid out each step, saying it would take at least 26 weeks to get it all done. The state pays Deloitte millions of dollars a year to maintain that portal and fix issues with it. But there's a cap on how much work the vendor will do every quarter, and it's unclear if they can get this project done without going over. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
We're still a year and a half out from Nashville's next mayoral race, but a field is starting to form. WPLN Cynthia Abrams reports that Metro Council member Joy Stiles has announced her bid for the city's top role.
Stiles' announcement was accompanied by a litany of complaints about Nashville's current mayor, Freddie O'Connell.
I did not endorse this mayor. I didn't encourage anyone to vote for him because I had a sense that this is what we would get with his leadership. I then watched in succession, starting from November of 2023, bad decisions being made.
Her frustrations ranged from O'Connell's handling of the Boring Company tunnel to HR allegations at Metro's 911 department, where the director was recently put on administrative leave. Stiles is in her second term representing the Antioch area. She has served as chair of the council's Women's Caucus. Mayor Freddie O'Connell hasn't officially announced his intention to run, but told Our Daily Show this month that he plans to. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
The Nashville Symphony's returning interim music advisor hopes to elevate orchestra players to the status of local sports stars. Leonard Slatkin says young people need a visual way to connect with music.
Not only do we hear music, we see it. Everything is in 4 or 5 minute sound bites, even in the classical world. But orchestras haven't figured that out yet, and they're going to have to. To relate to a younger audience, you have to speak their technological language.
Slatkin joined our midday show This Is Nashville to talk about his interim term leading the symphony, which is looking for a new leader. He served in the same role 20 years ago, conducting the first concert in the Schermerhorn Symphony Center. And at that time, the symphony was also between leaders. What to do now that the U.S. Treasury stopped minting pennies? The state office that oversees the financial systems for Tennessee has come up with new guidelines to help local governments and companies handle payments. Here are a few recommendations. Require exact change if paying by cash. Use credit or debit cards or online payment methods. Round up or round down to the nearest nickel. That last one could become state law if lawmakers make it so. The U.S. Treasury estimates there's an estimated 300 billion pennies still out there in people's houses, cars, or piggy banks. No information on how long the pennies will stay in circulation. Pennies are no longer being produced because it costs 3 cents to make the 1 cent coin. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Normally, not many people get to observe the world from Paul McCartney's vantage point. Except right now, in Nashville, we can all catch a glimpse of what he once saw. Marquise can tell you more.
I'm Marquise Munson here with another edition of Nashville Public Radio's What Where Wednesday, keeping you up to date with the happenings in Nashville this week. From Rat Boys karaoke at Vinyl Tap tonight to the legendary Mavis Staples at the Ryman on Saturday. For more events, head over to WNXP.org/events.
You're gonna get on in. It's up to you.
This week for What We're Wednesday, we feature Paul McCartney, photographs 1963-64, Eyes of the Storm. The gallery featured at the Friss Art Museum will wrap up on Monday, January 26, the last opportunity for fans to experience an intimate look into the Beatles at the start of Beatlemania. The photos in the exhibit were taken by McCartney himself and offer a personal perspective into the Beatles during the early days of their global stardom.
I'm Mark Scala, the chief curator here at the Friss Art Museum. So Paul McCartney was working with curators in London on an exhibition of his wife, Linda McCartney's photographs. People probably know. Linda was a great photographer. He said to the curators, I remember, he said this in an English accent, which I won't try. He said, I remember taking some pictures years ago. I wonder what happened to them. I haven't seen them. And so his archivist, he has an archives in London, his archivist scoured the archives for the photographs, and all they could find was a box of negatives and contact sheets. Now, your listeners may not know what negatives and contact sheets are because we hardly use them anymore, but this is like the first stage of what comes out of the camera. And so he said, oh, that was from 63 and 64. That was from late 1963 to early 1964. So essentially, he's looking at a time capsule of material that he didn't know about, he didn't remember. You take a photograph in the old days, it stays on the film until you print it, so you don't really know what it's going to look like. So he didn't really know what it would look like. But, this is 57 years later. And so can you imagine the emotional experience that must have been? Because he was 21 years old when he was taking these photographs. For those of us who remember being 21 years old, that's a really pivotal time in one's life. And of course he's having an experience with John and George and Ringo that nobody has ever had before. This is a really intense time in their lives. And so, not knowing what to expect, and so they started to look at what the photographs were and print them and actually scan them and enlarge them. The triggers that must have meant for him, oh yeah, that was so and so, and it's like a family photo album.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Paul McCartney was not trained to be a photographer. He knew something about photography. He had practiced with his brother Mike. They took pictures of each other, setting up, working with different lighting and different compositions. So he knew something about photography. He knew something about photographers. And there were so many photographers that were hanging around with them that they could look at the works being done by these really great photographers and get some ideas, get some tips on how to make an interesting photograph. So, the exhibition kind of gives you a sense of it being a more innocent time. It was a time almost immediately after JFK was assassinated. So there was a national pall. There's a national sadness. And I think the Beatles brought youthfulness, vigor, just, excitement about being alive. And I think that really had a lot to do with their success in this country. One of the things that happens when you see a photograph is you might think about what came before and what came after. And of course, there's a lot of pain that came after. With John Lennon, with George Harrison. And so this is just like a moment, a snapshot in time that I think is really, for anybody who's come here, they've just taken great pleasure at. It brings back a flood of memories of this, who they were when they first encountered the Beatles, what their experiences were, and how significant the Beatles are as cultural figures even today.
Paul, Ringo, George, John. Marvelous. We never had anything like it before. Fantastic.
So this is really a Nashville audience's last chance to see the Paul McCartney show. We have one more week. Then it goes to the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. So this is actually, it leaves the United States. So if you miss it here and you really want to see it, you can book your flight to Toronto now. But I really encourage you to come and see the show here. It's especially a good time to come and see the exhibition because half of our galleries are closed for another installation. We have a half-price admission. So it's only $10 to come into the galleries now, and it will be the best $10 you ever spent.
For more information on Paul McCartney, photographs 1963-64, and other events happening this week, visit WNXP.org. My name is Marquise Munson, and thank you for listening to another edition of What We're Wednesday.
I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.